We're live. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Environment Cabinet panel on Friday, 9th of July. It's 10 o'clock. So I need to read an announcement first. I'm sure you'll all be familiar with this, but we need to do it at each meeting, and it's COVID-19 attendance at this meeting. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of this meeting are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak, and then to switch their microphones off again once they've finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish, and cameras should be switched on if and when speaking in the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function, and use of the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting, so please don't put any other messages in there. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there'll be a vote. Members should vote using the meeting chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain, or in some cases you could just say agreed. I will declare the results after each vote. And breaks of at least 50 will be held every 2 hours, and then we'll see how we go from there. So in terms of membership changes, Tim Williams is substituting for Adrian England, so welcome Tim. Can't see everybody, but I'm assuming you're there. We don't have any apologies, and what I'm going to do now is ask members to introduce themselves. I'll start with me. So I'm Eric Buckmaster, Executive Member for the Environment, and I'm chairing this meeting. I'll go down the list now in the order I've got them. So the first one is Tina.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Tina Bartois. I'm the County Councillor for Letchworth North and the Labour spokesperson for the Environment.
Great, thank you, Tina. And now over to Caroline.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chairman. My name is Caroline Clapper. I'm the Conservative County Councillor for Watling Division, which covers Radlett, Aldenham and Elstree, and I'm also the Deputy Executive Member for Environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. And now Lewis.
Good morning, everyone. Lewis Cocking, the Conservative Member for Hoddesdon North Division.
Great, thanks. Ben?
Good morning. I'm Ben Crystal, Green Party Councillor for Hertford All Saints.
Great, thank you. And the first of our Steves, because I've remembered there are two, Steve Jarvis.
Good morning, I'm Steve Jarvis. I'm the County Councillor for Royston West and Rural, and I'm the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Great, thank you. And Jeff.
Good morning, Councillor Jeff Jones, Conservative Member for Buntingford and a member of this Cabinet panel.
Thank you. Graham? You're on mute, Graham.
Good morning, Graham McAndrew, Conservative Member at Bishop Stortford Rural.
Thank you. And Rena next.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rena Ranger and I am the Conservative Councillor for Rickmansworth East and Oxley Park.
Right, and we've got the two Williams coming up. First, Phil.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Firstly, I need to apologise that I don't have a camera attached to this device, so I can't turn it on. So they're going to sort it out within the next month. So if you just imagine my brother, who's going to be speaking next, but I'm slightly better looking.
I don't think you look that alike, actually.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. I am the Liberal Democrat councillor for Three Rivers Rural. Thank you.
Right. Thanks a lot. And now Tim.
Good morning, everybody. It's Tim Williams here. As you probably sense, I'm the nice brother. But yes, I'm the member for the Woodside Stanborough Division, which is in the sort of northeast side of Watford. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tim. And as I said earlier, you're substituting for Adrian. And Steve, Wortley, second Steve.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chairman. My name's Councillor Steve Wortley. I'm the Conservative Member for Cheshunt Central.
Great. Thank you very much. And again, welcome, everybody. I will read out the remit of the committee again for members of the public. So it's to do with delivery of sustainable Hertfordshire, including response to the climate emergency, minerals and waste planning, countryside management and rights of way, lead local flood authority, waste management and recycling, and Hertfordshire Waste Partnership. And in common with all cabinet panels, it's an advisory panel. There will be a great deal of interest in what we do. It's also very broad with touching points across county services and estates, and as an influence over the county as a whole. So I'm going to go on to minutes now to agree the minutes of the Environment Cabinet Panel meeting held on the 10th of June 2021. So if you're in agreement with that, could you type agree in the chat? So I'll just wait for Carly, our officer, to tell us if everyone's voted. And oh yeah, minutes agreed. Sorry, I missed that. Okay, petitions, there are none. So what we're going to do now is go on to the substantive items, and I'll introduce the presenting officers prior to each item. The first one is Sustainable Hertfordshire Action Plan. It's a presentation, and I believe Sass Pledger will be presenting. She's here, our Assistant Director, Property Resources. There's also another connected presentation a little later, which is an update generally on Sustainable Hertfordshire. This one is on resources specifically. There's a lot going on. You would have noticed that from the reports. So my advice to you is just think about, rather than being too granular in terms of our questions and comments, but let's look at some of these things generally, and any comments or things that you feel that we could discuss further. So I'll hand over now to Sass Pledger. Thank you, Sass.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to share the presentation on my screen if I may. So, but once in presentation mode, I won't be able to see any raised hands. So please indicate if you've got any questions.
Yeah, and I'll let you know, Sass, if I see any.
Thank you. Just go into presentation mode. Just checking, can everybody see that in presentation mode?
Yeah.
Perfect, then I'll start. So as the Chairman said, I'm the Assistant Director for Property, and I've been working closely with Julie Greaves, Officer at Hertfordshire County Council, responsible for delivering the sustainable work streams connected to the Sustainable Hertfordshire strategy. So this presentation will provide an update on the sustainability work stream that's being delivered specifically by the Resources Department within the Council. As you can imagine, the Resources Department encompasses work for a lot of other directorates. So some of the work that I'm talking about relates to schools, adult care, and other services within the Council. What I've done is I focused on the 6 ambitions that the Council has within its strategy. So being carbon neutral, future climates, reduce waste, biodiversity, and then there are 2 around all ambitions, one for us to be leaders in our own operations and the other to enable and inspire others. In terms of the first one, carbon neutral, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy launched a public sector decarbonisation scheme, and there was £1 billion worth of grant funding made available in September 2020, and this was being delivered by Salix Finance. The grant scheme was available for all councils to apply for capital, energy efficiency and heat decarbonisation projects. We applied and we were successful in securing £26 million worth of funding. This funding is going to be used to deliver 214 separate projects across the various schools and non-schools estate within the council. The only kind of, I suppose, slightly challenging aspect to the agreement of funding is that this work needs to be delivered by September 2021. So officers across the council have been working really hard on those schemes to ensure that we can deliver by that deadline. So I won't go into all of 214 schemes, but to give you a flavour of what sort of things that we're doing. So we're installing air source heat pumps, and that's around £11.9 million worth of work. We're looking at PV and battery stalls across school estates, that's 8.5 million. Double glazing and cavity wall insulation, all of which improves the energy performance of our buildings. And then carrying on with carbon neutral, because there's quite a lot of work we're doing in this area. So we're looking at the net zero carbon existing schools estate. So we're currently running 10 pilot school projects where we're identifying schools where we could put in heating electrification. This includes 3 special educational needs schools and 1 school where we're applying a fabric first approach. Oh, apologies.
I'm back.
It's gone back. I don't know why I did that. And we're looking at the fabric first approach to be trialled with one of our schools. Fabric first, if you're not familiar with that term, is where you look to build in the energy efficiency measures, and so that the school has a really good level of sustainability from the onset. We're working collaboratively to look at energy reductions across the entire school estates, and that's in progress, predominantly with our primaries and with the secondaries that are still under our control. But we're also working with the academies to look at how we can support them as well. And then we're piloting an initiative with 100 schools where we're looking at performance improvements for lighting and heating efficiency measures. We've already done this across our non-schools estate, and it's demonstrated a really good improvement in terms of our EPC ratings and also in terms of cost reductions for energy bills. So going on to the next one around carbon neutral. So we're going to pilot our first new school build. We're going to be building our first net carbon school in Buntingford, and that's due to be completed in August 2022. We're also looking to make improvements to the Valley School, so it will be net carbon zero in terms of all its operations. And then we're looking at the Highley School, where we'll be retrofitting net carbon zero initiatives there. So those would be our 3 pilots for the net carbon zero. We're also looking at electric vehicle charging. So we're working with colleagues in highways to identify heat maps. So if you imagine the network, the road network for Hertfordshire, we're looking at where we feel that it would be beneficial to install a vehicle charging point across our network. And then we're overlaying a map of where we have county assets that could possibly be utilised as hubs for those networks. And that piece of work is ongoing currently. And then in terms of our IT policy, we've developed a green ITC policy, which looks at sustainable procurement of IT equipment, looking at IT equipment that uses less energy, and then also looking at sustainable disposal of IT as well. And then carrying on with carbon neutral, we set up an initiative called Go Paperless, which is to support the council becoming a paper light council. We've run a pilot at the Stevenage offices that we're currently undertaking some energy improvement work at. And this has got 4 strands of work. One is to have electronic inbound mail, electronic outbound mail, so there's no need to print. Looking at the culture of printing across the organisation to reduce printing habits and looking more as a move more towards electronic media. And then also we're looking at our archiving systems and our paper reduction storage systems as well. We're also going to be exploring options for a 22 megawatt solar farm in Hertfordshire. The planning surveys are underway. This would be at Smallford Pit, and we're engaging with the local planning authority on the potential for us to set up our first solar farm there. This has got the support of the network provider, and we are the landowner on that site. The site unfortunately cannot be used for any other purpose due to the constraints there. And so we're trying to utilise it to be able to provide energy that will provide money to the authority that can then be reused for energy efficiency projects. Then we're also developing the HCC travel plan that will go live in August, and that's for staff to look at more sustainable means of transport. We have successfully purchased green energy. We went in through a consortium with other councils, and we now have a 100% green energy provision within the schools and non-schools estate. And we're exploring opportunities for carbon offsetting, and we're looking to bring forward a pilot programme working with colleagues in environment and infrastructure on the rural estate, where we can look at carbon sequestration measures. In terms of future climates, we're establishing our water baseline data, so we're looking at how we can reduce water consumption across the council. We have incorporated sustainability requirements into all building specifications for our own builds. We are incorporating sustainable aspirations into our larger scale developments. So, for example, Baldock, where we've got a large scale development happening there, we've just procured, just gone through an OG procurement for a master developer. And one of the areas that we undertook quite significant assessment around was their sustainability criteria and how they would incorporate sustainability improvements into the area. We've created our own energy strategy that's been completed as a live document, and we are incorporating sustainability ambitions into our big project, Future Ways of Working and Beyond Today. In terms of reducing waste, we're undertaking a waste review. This is for our own council activities to reduce the waste that we produce as a council, and I know that a lot of work has been done with colleagues in E&I around the bigger waste issues for the council. Grounds maintenance management, we're working in partnership to ensure we adhere to environmental policies for grounds maintenance in our own estate. We've introduced a new tree management policy where we're planting more trees than we are felling. We're working with subcontractors to finalise biosecurity, wildlife and ecology policy. And we're also working on plans for the Queen's Canopy initiative for next year and tree planting. In terms of biodiversity, we have developed a pollinator strategy that has been launched. It's gained a lot of interest, and we've just been asked by the local government association to do a big article on that. We're refreshing the Rural Estates Improvement Plan, where we're looking at more of the sustainability aspects to be included in that plan. We're also developing a strategic asset management plan. Step one will be looking at data in terms of energy performance of our buildings, which can influence our property decisions going forward. And stage two will be looking at targeted energy efficiency concession surveys and where we might want to consolidate buildings or look at energy improvements across the piece. And then all ambitions, leaders in our own operations. We have incorporated sustainability questions and criteria into procurement for where we procure new contracts and contractors. We have developed briefs for consultants to advise them on our sustainability aspirations and make it clear that they need to design sustainable principles in all of our developments. And we are introducing green leases for our new tenancies. And then finally, all ambitions enable and inspire others. My design and capital delivery team recently provided training on modern methods of construction to members and staff. That was very well received, and it's an area that we want to explore in terms of some of our future developments. We presented to the chairs a strategic information briefing. That was an event that was arranged by Hearts for Learning. We're also undertaking lots of briefings with schools via the Schools Forum in terms of energy efficiency programme that we're running through Salix. And we're engaging with academies because we feel, even though they don't fall under our estate, there's lots of work we can do to support them in terms of energy improvement measures. And we're also running awareness raising with our tenant farmers. We held quite a few workshops last year in terms of environmental programmes that they could adopt. Obviously, that's virtual at the moment, but we're looking to reinstate the workshops once COVID-19 restrictions are relaxed. So in summary, we've got 35 programmes of work, but if you could imagine one of those programmes is the 214 projects. It's quite a lot of work for us to be getting on with. Current RAG status, so how they are performing. We have 0 at red, which is really good news. We have 5 at amber, where we're just sort of kicking off the projects, and we've got 30 now operating at green. That's the end of my presentation. Apologies, a lot to get through in a short space of time. I'll stop sharing so that I can see you if there's any questions.
And thank you very much, Sass. I mean, that is absolutely tremendous in terms of the amount going on, and of course the influence we'll have on other organisations across the county as well in terms of sharing best practice as we go on. So I've got a couple of hands up, so I'll go for them in the order I can see. So Steve Wortley first.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sass. Superb presentation. Great to see that Herts is doing so many green initiatives in the area. Huge passion of mine. I've got solar panels and electric cars, so it's something that I'm really keen on. Something I just needed to pick up on, and I think I heard you right, but please correct me if I'm wrong. You said the new school at Highley was going to be retrofitted, and I just wondered if there's any reason why it's being retrofitted, because at the moment it hasn't even started construction yet. I just wondered if you knew why that was. And I do have a second question, Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, do you want to ask both or wait for the answer?
Yes, on social media, there's lots of excitement about EV exclusive charging stations that are popping up. I think there's a huge one in Braintree, which is solely EV, and they're often crying out for land around the country for exclusive EV charging stations. And I just wondered if we'd had any approach at all from companies such as this for one in Hertfordshire. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks. Want to go ahead, Sass?
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of Highley, I will have to defer to my head of service for DCD as to why that is a retrofit school. She's just responding to me now, so hopefully I'll have a response for you in a moment. We have been working with some companies that are looking at EV, and we had an initial conversation with one of the providers, and they very much wanted us to do an assessment of where our potential sites could be, and then they could overlay where they felt that there was need. So we're going to be doing the first piece of work that I mentioned within the presentation in terms of looking at our own heat map. So working with colleagues in highways who've got a really good understanding of the highways network, looking at where we have potential in terms of our own estate, and then we may look to either deliver it ourselves, or then probably more likely look to a technical expert to deliver it for us. But we want to have that bit of research done first before we go out to market.
Sure, absolutely.
And then in terms of Highley, it's because the design and planning application has already been completed prior to us gaining Salix funding. So the design and the plans have already been approved. So we need to retrofit the sustainability measures within it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you,
Can I
Chair.
just sense check, does that mean after the standard construction has taken place or during?
Just the plans. So the plans have been approved without all of the energy efficiency measures. So by retrofit, I'm sorry, it's probably a little bit of a misleading term. The building has not been built, but in terms of plans have been signed off, so we need to retrofit it into the plans.
Gotcha.
Which isn't a massive one, but it's more of a planning term.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Thank you for that. I've
you.
got Caroline next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Firstly, thank you so much, Sass. It's a great presentation. It's clear to see that you guys are doing so much fantastic work. Also really wonderful to hear about all the successful grant applications that you've been putting forward. So thank you very much for that. I suppose what I wanted to really understand is, you know, this golden thread of sustainability is going to be something that needs to run through, I suppose, every single department, every single portfolio, every single cabinet panel. And it's how really we are going to, you know, communicate that, get that through. Will things from other panels be ultimately coming back to this panel, or will you be visiting all the other panels? I suppose I just wanted to really understand how the overarching concept of sustainability, which is so important, and we've got these targets that we need to, you know, we need to hit, how we're going to make sure that every single person across the county, every single department is, you know, totally on board of this, and how that's going to be managed most effectively. Thank you.
Good question.
Thank you. So as you know, we have Julie Greaves in post, and she is working on a comprehensive programme across the entire council. So obviously I sit within resources, so I'm managing my bit and I hook in with Julie and the Sustainability Board in terms of the work that we're doing. We're in quite a fortunate position within resources because we do have kind of tentacles that go out across the whole organisation in terms of procurement comes via us, IT comes via us, all of the build programmes come via us, so we can challenge other services to ensure that they're taking sustainability criteria into consideration. But in terms of the broader communications package, that's something that Julie Greaves is leading on. And I can see she's on the line, Chairman, so I don't know if she's probably the best place to take this rather than me.
I was going to say that. I saw them pop out and Simon's there too, but yeah, Julie.
Thank you very much. Yeah, previous to this panel being created, the Sustainable Hertfordshire team were presenting to every single cabinet panel for that very reason. We didn't have a specific home, and also in recognition of the fact that our work does cross the whole organisation. Now that this panel has been established and we are reporting formally to this particular panel, we can also report to other panels dependent on the subject area and the topic that needs to be, reported. And if it's a specific subject area that may need something to go through the cabinet process, for example, that may relate to resources and performance, then it would need to go through resources panel. So we'll make sure that we go through the correct panel depending on what the item is and what the decision is that needs to be made. But in terms of general updates and general overview, we will also always come back to the environment panel. We have also in the past made sure that reports were then shared for all 78 members. So even though you don't sit on a specific panel, you would also get the papers so that you do get an overview of that particular subject area.
That's great. Did you want to add anything, Simon?
Only that it's in the later paper, but SAS is pioneering the way with a presentation to this panel. What we're suggesting in a later paper is this panel may actually want us to invite others from across each department, maybe once or twice a year, to present, just like SAS has, to the panel about the work. So that's another way for this panel to keep on top of the whole range of work. But the reality is, I suspect, as Julie said, each person, like SAS, would go back to their own panel at some point to update their panel directly as well.
That's great, and we'll make sure that's part of the recommendation later. So if that's okay, we've got Rena next.
Thank you, Chair.
Hello, Rena.
Hi, it was just to ask about the excellent work and the innovative work we are doing with these schools. Just to learn the lessons of the pandemic, we know that we need great ventilation, possibly higher ceilings and all sorts of stuff to stop outbreaks of COVID-19 and other stuff reoccurring in schools. Is this something that is absolutely opposed to some of the energy efficiency work we want to do, or is there a way to reconcile both to be energy efficient and possibly COVID or pandemic compliant?
Thank you. So in terms of ensuring that our school designs are COVID compliant going forward, we feel that we can marry the two together. We do have really good opportunity to create schools that are more interconnected in nature. So, for example, the schools we're looking at would have more natural light, better ventilation, all of the things which help pupils learn in a more constructive way, access to green spaces outside. So all of the aspects that we feel are important from a sustainability objectives are marry really well with the COVID-19 ones.
Yeah, so we meet the health requirements as well.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, you okay with that? Yeah, you've gone off. So that
that's perfectly fine. It was just I was speaking to a teacher and he was convinced that their outbreaks were minimal in school because their school building had been built when we were fighting a TB pandemic. So very high ceilings.
Oh, right.
Big windows, probably not very environmentally friendly, but I'm just wondering if there's a way to bring that into the 21st century.
Yeah, there's a balance to be made then, isn't there? Okay, thank you, Rena. So I've got Steve Jarvis now.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for the presentation, Seth. You mentioned that there was a list of the 214 projects that have been pursued by September. I think it'd be very useful if that were made available to members. You talked later on about the objective to inspire, and that's part of that is by people understanding what the council is doing. So if we can get that information, then we can talk about what's going on in our individual areas. A couple of other points. I was not entirely clear when you were talking about identifying locations for EV charging. This is for provision of public EV charging facilities, presumably. And then the final point, you talked about a solar farm for generation of energy for the grid. But there are presumably also opportunities for local generation, putting PV panels on council buildings at its simplest, which avoids all the complications of grid connections that these large schemes requires. So is work going on in terms of looking at local generation to support the energy needs of individual council buildings?
So I think there were 3 elements to that then. So do you want to go through those, Sass?
Thank you. And I think that you've proved your point, Councillor Jarvis, in terms of if you'd have had the 214, one of the projects we're looking at is PV on our own council estate. So apologies for not making that available to you. So yes, we have a really comprehensive programme where we're looking to look at local energy generation across our own council estate and our own buildings. So that's one of the projects that actually is being funded by the SALIX funding. And yes, I can make the wider spreadsheet available in terms of the 214 or more projects that we're doing within resources. And then in terms of the EV charging hubs, we're looking at public charging, so it would be roadside sort of. If you can imagine, there's been a few initiatives recently where you pull in, you can do high speed EV charging to your vehicle and then pull off. So we're looking at that sort of scheme across the council. So hopefully to be able to generate income as well as provide a more connected authority for people with electric vehicles.
So these are roadside rather than on the road.
Yes. Yes, and with the proposed solar farm, we're looking at battery storage as well. And something that I had worked on with another council is that we had locally generated electricity from a solar farm, and then we'd fed it through to local businesses. Unfortunately, with the location of the one that we're looking to take forward, our first, there isn't any local businesses that we could do a direct feed to, but there may be opportunity going forward where that could be the case.
Okay.
And of course, EV needs to fit in with the highways EV policies. So, okay, so got that. Thank you. And Lewis, next.
Thank you, Chairman, and brilliant presentation, Sass. I've just got 2 questions, if I may. So, the first is on the SALIX funding. So in the environmental sector, most people do a fabric first approach, doing all of the insulation and what have you. So why have we focused when we were accessing that funding? Because there was a bit at the bottom on cavity wall, and the rest was electricity generation. And then my second question is, where we were talking about our new builds and where we are a developer as a council with the higher standards that we want to do. I'm pleased that we've touched on that. Are we going to concentrate on that fabric first approach, because you do get more environmental gain by making houses so energy efficient in terms of making sure they're insulated right to the top notch than you do putting solar panels on, because it is more efficient to have a large scale solar farm than it is solar panels on everyone's house. So if you could just comment on those 2 things, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the fabric first approach, I completely agree. That's where we would want to be, and that's what we're looking to develop in terms of any new developments in our own estate. But we've got quite an aging estate that we need to do a lot of retrofit. So hence looking at the air source heat pumps, the PV, the double glazing, we're looking at retrofitted measures where we can reduce the energy loss and the energy usage. That will be looking at cavity wall as well, obviously for buildings where it's appropriate. But yes, in terms of where we want to head to, we want to look at offsite construction. We want to look at fabric first. So yeah, very much on the agenda.
Okay, so modern methods of construction, etc. Yeah. Okay. Steve's still got his hand up. I'm assuming that's an old one. So Graham next.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sass, for the presentation. I think it just demonstrates all the hard work the officers have been doing for the past few years, and there wasn't an awareness, but now we've got the opportunity through this panel to promote what you've actually been doing and all the other officers, and I think it's a really good forum moving ahead. So that's it, Chairman. Thank you.
That's a very good point, Graham. Yeah, we haven't just woken up to it.
No, 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 absolutely not.
Yeah. So I think Tina now.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your presentation, Sass, and all of the work that the officers are doing. So I have two linked questions around decarbonisation. So I was wondering what the challenges have been of decarbonising our non-schools estate and what that means for reaching net zero carbon with schools. And linked to that, do you have a figure for how much of our estate is net zero carbon? And could I add something else, Chairman?
Yeah, go on.
I was wondering if we could have the list of the 100 pilot schools that we're working on the lighting and heating with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, go on, Sass.
Yes, we can certainly provide you with the list. And in terms of net carbon zero, what we're doing currently is we're doing an audit with a consultancy around our energy usage. So we're trying to now put figures against usage across the whole of the estate. And then so we'll be able to assess which are our better performing buildings and which are our worst performing buildings, because clearly we've got targets we need to reach by 2030, so we need to be monitoring our performance against that. And then in terms of our non-schools estate, we have looked to introduce energy efficiency measures. So we've been doing it for the last sort of 4 or 5 years. That's why this project with the recent release of SALEX funding is concentrating more on the schools estate, although we are looking at PV on some of our non-schools estate. In terms of energy efficiency, as you know, you do have to have EPC ratings for these buildings, which they don't provide the whole story. It's just part of the story. So we are looking as part of our strategic asset management plan to undertake targeted energy efficiency assessments on our non-schools estate buildings.
Okay, all right with that, Tina? Yeah.
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's the last question then on this. So, and thank you very much for answering all those questions, Sass, and for the presentation. Absolutely brilliant. So we're being asked now to note the presentation. So if you could all go into chat and agree or for whatever you want to say. So I think that's most people now. So yeah, so presentation noted. Okay, thank you very much. And again, thank you, Sass, for the presentation. We're now going on to item 4, which is to do with the Buntingford Recycling Centre update. And I think Matt King, who is our head of waste management, is online to do this one. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, panel. This report is an information update paper on provision of a recycling centre for the Buntingford area. As set out in the summary and background sections of the report, all recycling centres across Hertfordshire were closed in March 2020 in accordance with government guidance on essential reasons to leave the house. And a phased reopening of centres began in May 2020 with all but the Buntingford and Coal Green sites opened and operational, albeit with restrictions, by July 2020. Due to their comparatively small size and inability to effectively operate with social distancing requirements, these 2 sites have remained closed to date. The current site at Buntingford has long been recognised as unfit for purpose. And panel members are referred within the document to Appendix B of the report that shows the lack of space for containers and the absence of any dedicated parking or walkways for site users at the Buntingford facility. Appendix A also shows the challenges of exchanging containers safely. So this report sets out that the County Council has, despite efforts to maintain the footprint of the existing site, now returned land outside of its registered demise to the adjacent landowner. This reinstatement of the boundary line, which is shown in Appendix C of the report, was completed in June, but the panel should note that no blame is attributed to the adjacent landowner, who's acting well within his rights and whose relationship with the County Council has been amicable since he assumed ownership of the nearby site in the area. The location of the site at the entrance to the industrial area has created difficulties with access and egress for local businesses, as alongside surface damage to the road when containers are exchanged. And the panel again should note this is not a decision report on the future provision of a recycling centre to serve the Buntingford area, but as is set out in the report recommendations, it's asking members to acknowledge that the site will need to remain closed even after national restrictions on social distancing are eased, and to endorse work that is already underway to investigate alternative site provision in the Buntingford area. It's recommended that the panel request a report is brought before them prior to the end of the calendar year, detailing the outcome of those investigations. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And Graham's got an old hand up, I think, but Ben Crystal's here. I wonder whether I should give the first chance to speak to Jeff Jones, who's the local member. You haven't put your hand up yet, but I just wondered if you wanted to say something.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, sorry, I was having trouble getting my hand up, but there it is. Yeah, good to see this paper come forward. It's well documented that this site, as you put, unfit for purpose. Yeah, it really has been unfit for purpose for quite a while, and it was highlighted, I suppose, during the COVID restrictions when it wasn't able to open, along with when other sites were able to open. Yeah, it's unfortunate that it does remain closed. It's caused a lot of inconvenience locally for residents. I have had emails, phone calls, social media. Well, it was basically since lockdown, asking when the site would open, and I was reassured previously by the exec member that it would open as soon as COVID restrictions, social distancing restrictions, were eased. So that was always my response locally. And the responses I was getting, no, come on, Jeff, it's never going to open, you know. And so I've been proved wrong on that, which is a little bit embarrassing locally. But I mean, really what we want to do is make sure we go forward now, because it's always has been a difficult location. It's right at the entrance to an industrial estate that is now expanding. The town has expanded by 70% in population since 2011. So you know, and a new expanded site is needed for the town and the surrounding villages that use it. The nearest locations, as I think it's in the report, as you're probably well aware, the nearest other sites are Ware and Royston, which are quite a distance. You're probably looking at 10 miles each way. And really, I'm just really keen to see towards the end of the year when it's brought back to, well, it won't come back to this panel, will it? But it will be brought to, yes, it probably will come back to this panel. Yeah. Do
you want me to go to Simon
alternative sites? Yeah. So it would have been nice to have seen in the report today the other sites that could be possible for a relocation, but perhaps that work's still ongoing.
Yeah, I think a report's coming back, but I'll go to Simon Aries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
I'll let Matt just pick up the bit about why the sites currently being searched for aren't in the report. But Jeff, on your first point, apologies. When you were told by the previous exec member it would reopen, that was the case.
Yeah,
that was before we had the dispute with the landowner around the land. So what has changed is simply that the landowner has said, you're on our land, my land, you need to go, get off, which we're doing. And that makes the site even less viable, well, unviable, even to open after social distancing. So sorry, I can absolutely appreciate the awkward position it put you in, but at the time that was true. We were intending to reopen it. But Matt, if you want to just say why we didn't include sites at this stage.
Yes, no problem. I think the panel will recognise that sometimes land use for waste purposes can be contentious, despite even if it's a recycling centre. So we didn't want to undermine the efforts of estate colleagues in any negotiations they may have. That work is ongoing. We have identified a number of sites. The next stages in that piece of work are now to see if the landowners are receptive, understand what they would want for it, and also to do assessments in terms of planning assessments. You would rate these sites in terms of deliverability, viability through a planning permission process, alongside costing the developments. We hope to include all of that information in terms of any shortlisted sites that may be available in the report at the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, so there's something else to come, Jeff. You okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I would just add that, I mean, it's very disappointing that they couldn't get an agreement with the current landowner, but there you are. We have to move forward on that. This landowner is obviously a lot more diligent than I think actually it was previously owned by East Arts Council. I think that's probably when it goes back to. So perhaps that's where the arrangement for the actual the size of the site, etc., wasn't formalised in. But there you are. We don't know that, and we have to move forward. So
I don't think we're going to answer that one today, Jeff.
No, I don't expect to. No.
But thanks for your comments. I've got Ben who put his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Matt, for the report. I was just trying to understand whether there is a link between size of site and sort of rate of recycling when people are dropping waste at these sites. So presumably small sites will be harder to put in the various recycling containers. Do you know roughly what the proportion of recycled material changes from a small site like that to somewhere like Ware? And if it is significant, then is this something that the council we want to have fewer small sites and more large sites? Is that sort of the strategy?
I'm sure Matt has a good answer to that.
So we have a public facing document, so the local authority collected waste spatial strategy, which the panel considered at its last meeting, has an annex which is specifically defined for recycling centres. A refresh of that document, which I believe was the last iteration was 2019, is anticipated to come to this panel in September. And that will be then subject to the latest housing growth assessments and justification of need for specific areas. Broadly speaking, that strategy sets out a preference for larger, more modern, fit-for-purpose sites that can cater for larger catchment areas. And as you would have seen if you visited the Ware sites and the design of future sites coming forward, we look to include things such as split-level design, complete separation of container exchange vehicles from residents, walkways, and increased recycling capacity. So whilst there's not an obvious demonstrable difference between size of site and performance necessarily, because there are variables such as staff use, peak times, etc., it is the case that the Buntingford site currently, when it has been operational, does not perform as well because it is severely restricted. The report indicates circa 5-6% less than the best performing centres. So yes, if we can get a network of more modern fit for purpose centres that are necessarily larger, they tend to provide a number of operational benefits in terms of capacity, queuing off the highway, safe environments, etc. So I hope that helps.
Great, thank you, Matt. You okay with that, Ben? Yeah, no further questions. And Tina now.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that, Matt. It was a really useful summary. I was wondering if we are to keep this site closed, I was wondering what the impact would then be on the nearest sites, especially the one in Royston, because it's not open 7 days a week.
Okay,
Thank
Matt.
you.
So the impact would be minimal on those surrounding sites. Certainly the site to the south at Ware, which is 7 days operational, has got significant capacity. The Buntingford site, when it was operational, has a 3-hour operational window, 7 days per week. It is run on a part-time basis by staff which are currently redeployed in other areas of the network. So we're not talking about a huge quantity of material that is displaced currently from the centres, and it can be accommodated into the Royston and the Ware sites as it has been during the course of the pandemic.
Okay. All right, thank you, and thank you everyone for your questions. There are no more questions, so I'll read the recommendations. First one is panel notes the content of this report and that the Buntingford Recycling Centre will need to remain closed even after national social distancing restrictions are eased. That's for the reasons explained. And the panel note and endorse the continued investigation into alternative sites in the Buntingford area and request a report be brought back to the Environment Panel before the end of 2021, detailing the outcome with a recommendation on the future of recycling centre provision in the Buntingford area. So if you go into your chats and put your vote in there. Okay, yeah, so looks like, right, I think everyone's agreed that now. So thank you everyone for that, and thanks Matt. We're now going on to the second update on Sustainable Hertfordshire, and this time it's Julie Greaves coming back. She's Head of Sustainability, and she's going to give us an update on progress.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, panel. As previously said, there's a lot of work going on with regard to Sustainable Hertfordshire. It covers the whole of the organisation and specifically working with lots of different service areas too. We made the commitment to come back to panels on a 6-monthly basis, and at that particular time we didn't have a specific panel to report to. Now we have the Environment Panel. We'll be coming back to this particular panel on a much more regular basis to give updates, and as one of the recommendations for this report is to come back with service-specific updates to this panel as well as more general updates. So this gives an overview of progress to date, and we felt it was important to come back to this panel in July because it's a brand new portfolio, new chair, and also some new panel members. So hopefully it'll give a good overview of progress so far. In terms of a little bit of background, the climate change emergency was declared in 2019. The Sustainable Hertfordshire strategy was approved in March 2020, and then the action plan in December 2020. There are 9 ambitions within the strategy itself, and then over 200 actions within the action plan. When we come back in September, we're hopeful that we'll be able to bring you back the full 200 actions with a RAG rating so that you'll be able to see total progress being made across the whole of the organisation. So I won't go over the public sector decarbonisation works because Sass has gone into a lot of detail around that. But just to update you in terms of carbon baseline, we had our baseline work done in 2019, and we're now working with consultants to update that for 2020 so that we've really got some stats to be able to show you in terms of progress made for carbon neutral organisation. They're still working on the final draft of that report at the moment, and we'll bring that back to you in September. In terms of funding, as well as Public Sector Decarbonisation Fund, we are bidding against lots of other funds. So, for example, DEFRA and also UK Power Network. Some of them have been successful, some of them we're still waiting for, but we continue to bid whenever funds become available. We'll update you when we are successful. Work still continues on looking at the fleet, and again we'll have a report to bring back to you in September. We're waiting for the Energy Saving Trust to provide us with their first overview of options with regard to our own fleet. Lots of work to do with schools. I know that SAS covered the building side of things, but we're also now very heavily involved with Hearts for Learning and also working with our consultants MACE to talk to schools around the educational side of climate change and sustainability. We've run a competition recently with lots and lots of entries to the competition, and we're going to be judging those over the next few weeks. So we're really starting to engage with schools now, whereas before we couldn't have any kind of conversation with them. So we're really working on buildings and people with regard to the school estate. Just in terms of future climates and being ready for future climates, we're working with WSP, who are our independent consultants, to look at climate risk assessments, and that work is ongoing. They have done some workshops with key members of staff to look at the potential risks associated with future climates. So, for example, severe weather events, either flooding or drought, and also hot summers that can be have a real impact on service delivery, specifically related to people and the people related services such as children's services and adult care. So that particular climate risk work is again ongoing, and we hope to give you a much more full update towards the end of the summer. In terms of biodiversity work, we've got the work ongoing across the authority area with Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership, and that's looking at our biodiversity baseline and helping us to establish a appropriate baseline across the whole of the authority area. We're also working with district and borough colleagues in terms of the green spaces audit work too, and looking for opportunities for improvement. The report gives you a summary of what's going on with regard to comms, but just to update you further, since writing the report, we have successfully recruited a full-time member of staff, and they will be responsible for working on climate change and sustainability. And that will really help us, because at the moment it's been a bit sporadic and it is resource intensive. So we're hoping having 100% dedicated resource for comms will be really good. Again, Clean Air for All, an update since writing the report. We have now recruited a full-time air quality officer, a programme manager, and that's a jointly funded post with Public Health. They have got to give 2 months notice, but within that time period, we'll have a fully qualified and 100% dedicated resource to look at air quality. And part of that, hopefully, will be looking at the air quality strategy and also the implementation plan that we're seeking to deliver. And just to qualify, there's a typo in paragraph 531. I know it says Clean Air for All by 2020. That should be 2030. So I apologise that's a typo. Just very briefly on HGCSP, the partnership has been in existence now for just over a year, and the officer working group has delivered 4 action plans. So all partners are working. That's the LEP, the County Council, and all Tenderton Borough Councils. We've got the Water Action Plan, the Carbon Action Plan, the Transport Action Plan, and the Biodiversity Action Plan. And now officers are pushing forward with the implementation of the actions, and also looking at other subject areas such as behavioural change, the campaigns that we need to run for that, and also looking at adaptation. Just in terms of an update on COP26 and Citizens Assembly, again, we've been successful in recruitment as of this week, and so we have now, hopefully by the end of this month, we'll have somebody in post, again, 100% to focus on COP26. And this is a really important piece of work. It's a fantastic opportunity across the UK, and for us in terms of Hertfordshire to hold a Hertfordshire conference of parties, specifically looking at climate change issues for the county. So we're really pleased to get somebody on board to help us deliver that. And they will also be looking at pulling together and organising a citizens' assembly later on to help us with the review of the Sustainable Hertfordshire strategy. And then just in terms of internal updates, we now have 8 members of staff working in the Sustainable Hertfordshire team. That's in as well as the other post that I've just talked through. We're still engaging with our staff. We've got a staff working group. We're doing lunch and learns, and we're also providing updates to our bespoke training offer with working with APSI the Association for Public Sector Excellence. And then lastly from me is just on the funding situation. As you'll remember, there was a 10 million capital and 2 million revenue dedicated through the IP process specifically to deliver Sustainable Hertfordshire ambitions. We've run an initial trawl of bids, and we've got the first set of bids in, and they're going to be considered by the Sustainable Hertfordshire Board this afternoon, and then we'll go to executive members on Monday. So we're hopeful to get sign off for a really good selection of projects across the different directorates. One of them looking at schools, one of them looking at waste, audits, as Sass said, that's one of her areas of work, the waste audit, and then Waste Disposal Authority functions in terms of carbon assessments and baseline work, and also the delivery of the Queen's Green Canopy, which is a separate item on this particular agenda. And then lastly, the project that we're considering as well is the air quality monitoring software that we will need to have good data across the county. That's it from me. Happy to take questions, and there's 2 recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much, Julie. That's tremendous. Such a lot of initiatives. I bet you're all glad to be on this cabinet panel, aren't you? So it's really, really interesting. So I've got some questions coming up. First one is Steve Jarvis.
Thank you. Yeah, there's some interesting things starting to progress there. A few questions. In terms of the carbon baseline work, there was some baseline work done in 2019, and I'm not sure that we've seen the results of that. But of course, the issue about updating that baseline to 2020 is that there are lots of COVID-related impacts of that. Some of which are clearly transitory and some of which could potentially become permanent. And so I wonder how that's been handled, and I wonder how that also is feeding into work that is being done on some of the post-COVID changes in the way in which the council operates, because there are clearly carbon savings which could be captured or lost as part of that process. And I also wonder, in the same area, what we're doing. Some of those savings are the fact that which are not directly the council's emissions, they're potentially Scope 3 emissions. The fact that we haven't all driven to Hertford today to have this discussion. So are we trying to capture that? There's potentially a significant amount of carbon that relates to office and travel, both on business and commuting. So are we capturing any of that in the carbon baselining? In terms of fleet carbonisation, that was, I think, one of my criticisms about the original action plan, was it looked rather unambitious. It kind of looks as if that's now progressing a little faster. Is that true or not? And in terms of the bids against the central fund, there isn't any indication of the scope of those. I think so. There's 10 million of capital and 2 million of revenue. It isn't clear from the list whether or not that constitutes a bid for 8 million or 800,000 or 80k. I mean, I suspect it's neither of those extremes, but it would be good to understand what proportion of the currently available funding would be committed if those bids are successful.
Well, that's a lot of questions, Steve. I've written them down just in case, but I'm sure Julie has as well, and I'm sure she can certainly answer the last one. But yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the carbon baseline works. The 2019 carbon baseline work was done to help us establish the original ambitions. So there are some stats and some figures within the original Sustainable Hertfordshire strategy, and that allowed us to develop and finalise the ambitions that we've got within that particular strategy. So it does give you some headline figures around the fact that, for example, HCC estate emissions are very high. They're our biggest proportion of emissions, and Hertfordshire-wide, the biggest proportion comes from transport. So there were some baseline figures in that 2019 work. In terms of updating it for 2020, you're absolutely right. It's been really, really difficult, and there will be some anomalies in the data. What we've spoken to local partnerships about is trying to rationalise that by looking a bit further back and projecting maybe from 18 forwards rather than just from 20, so that we do have a little bit of historical data in there as well. But there's also the issue that you said around the fact that those changes due to COVID, some of them of which have been positive, we would like to keep. So, for example, travel and transport is one. Now, you know that some meetings can continue online. So, for example, panels are discussive, so we can continue those online, but cabinet and decision making, development control, for example, have to be in person. So we're beholden on the regulations and legislations in terms of that particular aspect. So there will be some positives that we can continue, and there will be some of them that we will have to revert back to the previous ways of working. Other bigger decisions around the estate, I can't comment on that. I'm sure if Sass was still with us, she'd be able to give us some indication with regard to the work on the estate. But as far as I'm aware, there's an ongoing piece of work that's looking at office space. We know that we've got the smarter worker and flexible worker and beyond today aspirations. So that is going to look at the estate generally as to how much office space we need. So that is a work in progress, but I don't have any specific answers for you on that today. In terms of Scope 3, again, absolutely right. There are some things that are completely outside of our control. And some of the issues that we've seen in terms of behaviour changes in terms of COVID have been positive, others have been negative. So we're hoping to lock in some of those positive behaviours, and hopefully that would come out via our work with HCCSP and also via the LEP. In terms of fleet, yes, the action plan was very generalised in terms of some of the statements that we made, but behind the scenes, the push was from community protection actually to look at fleet, and that then broadened out to take into account the whole of the organisation. And that work has really progressed because we've had officers that can work on it. So we also engage with EST for free, and then the further work will be costed out in terms of the physical opportunities work that they're going to do as the next phase. So yeah, that work's progressed faster than we had hoped, which is great. We have still got some issues with data, but again, that's being dealt with via officers within Sustainable Hertfordshire and working with our colleagues in data and also resources and performance. And then the last point around bids, just to give you the reason we couldn't put the figures in here is because they're still going through the parallel process of going through board and executive member. But just to give you an idea, in total, the list that I've got there is looking at approximately 460,000. So it isn't a vast amount. Some of them are greater than others. So, for example, QGC is approximately 200,000 and the waste audit is about 10,000. So there's a combination of sizes of bid. And then once they've been through the formal process, we'll be able to come back to you with some details around the final costing and also the scope of those bids.
Yeah, and am I right then, Julie, in saying that departments, so there will be bidding periods
Yes.
ongoing through which departments can then bid for revenue or capital?
Exactly, yes. And the way that it works is that anybody can bid for the funding. The bids come to us in terms of Sustainable Hertfordshire to look at whether or not they're meeting the ambitions. They're then given an assessment by finance to make sure that they follow due process. Then they go through executive member, chief officer, and potentially they will come to cabinet depending on the value and whether or not they're revenue or capital. So there's lots of steps to go through, but we're trying to get everybody engaged in the bidding process, and my staff are visiting team meetings and unit meetings now to tell people about the bidding process and also what they can bid for.
Yeah, and I guess some of them are seed to make progress later, or enabling initiatives to enable further work later on.
Absolutely, and that would be the case for the Waste Disposal Authority baseline work. You know, the work at the moment is looking at defining the baseline, and then hopefully coming out from that will then be how do we identify options and potential for reducing that particular carbon emissions.
Great, thank you, Julie. I need to go to other members now. So next one is Ben.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Julie. That was a really interesting presentation. A couple of questions. Firstly, on para 5.6 on the Green Recovery Fund, you sound like so it suggests that 5 of our 7 applications have gone through to the second stage with the UK with the Green Recovery Fund, which is great, and all credit to the officers for doing all that work to get them going through. At what stage will those be shared with members? Is that something that can happen soon, or would you wait until everything's kind of being decided? Because it would be lovely to know. I'm just curious and just nosy, I'm afraid. And another question, para 519. Which is about a risk. So you've obviously been doing work. You and your team have been doing work on understanding the risks associated with climate change and the impacts. And you mentioned, so you're looking to understand the top 10 risks for the council. Is that? I think understanding those risks is obviously a key part of the council's response to climate breakdown. Are those risks going to be kind of shared with members as well? I think, because personally, I think it would be really helpful to sort of understand what those are, and kind of at a not just sort of a superficial level, but a sort of fairly kind of in detailed level, because they can obviously interact and cause unexpected changes. So it would be great to hear that we're going to have a chance to hear about those. And lastly, I think carbon trajectory, I think you may have said in the report that is going to be presented to the panel later in the year, and I just wanted to confirm sort of that we get that information. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The Green Recovery Fund, in terms of specifically around UK power networks, yes, absolutely. We can pull together a list of the applications that we made. That's not a problem. We can share those via email, and then we can bring an update when we hear. Some of them, some of these bids take a long time to assess, even though they make us jump through hoops to get them submitted within a few days. They then take a while to come back to us. Not a problem. We can let you know the outcome of those as soon as we know. In terms of the risk assessment work, yeah, there's although we've said the top 10 there, I'm sure we will bring to you the full report, which identifies everything that's come out from that climate risk assessment, because we will need to make sure that all service areas are fully understanding of that, because it will have an impact on their business continuity plans. So absolutely, we will bring that back to you. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that in September. We've got an update with the consultants next week, so hopefully we're on track to bring that back to you in September. And then the same thing for the trajectory work. We are very hopeful that we'll bring that back to you in September as well. The reason we haven't got it now is because we've gone back to them and asked them for a bit more data and a bit more work to make it clearer, actually to look at some of the risks associated with the lack of data. So we want to make sure we understand what it is that's missing, so we can bring that back to you as well in September.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of this element is being ready for future climates. It's not only that, but it's also making sure that whatever actions any department makes doesn't have an adverse impact on another. Am I right in saying that, Julie?
Absolutely right. Yes. Yeah. The climate risk assessment initial phase is specifically looking at adult care and children's, specifically because they are the more people-related functions. But we also are then going to expand that out to look at all other directorates for that very reason, to make sure that we do have that interaction and an overview of all of the risks associated. So, yeah, that is something that we're looking at. And also, just to add to that, again, as an additional piece of work, we're also then going to expand that out to look at the potential in terms of health risks. So at the moment, we're focusing on the physical service risks, but we do need to look at what that means in terms of health and well-being risks as well associated with climate change.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Ben, and thank you again, Julie. So now, Rena.
Thank you very much. I'm just asking about the Clean Air for All. Could you please explain to me what the obligations are for air quality for the county council and the district and borough councils? Because I thought it was the district and borough councils that were responsible.
Yeah, absolutely right. There's there are specific responsibilities in terms of environmental health at a district level in terms of air quality monitoring. And so the 10 district borough councils work together in partnership, specifically relating to air quality. Previously, the County Council didn't have a specific statutory role with regard to air quality. However, we feel that we should have that coordination and partnership approach to tackling air quality, and that's why the air quality strategy and also implementation plan was written in a coordinated and collaborative approach. So that was written on behalf of or in partnership with all of the authorities, so Tennyson Borough Council and the County Council. And there's also a county-wide Herts and Beds and Essex in terms of air quality work as well. So there's a regional aspect to this as well as a county aspect. And so in consultation with the previous executive member for Public Health, Tim Hutchins, and previous executive member for Highways and Environment and Growth and Infrastructure, we felt that we should have a much more coordinated approach and have a specific resource. And so that's why we've gone down the road of employing somebody. And the person that we've employed has a very good professional qualification with regard to air quality. They know about the data, they understand it all, and we think that's that would be a benefit to all of us, all of the authorities in Hertfordshire, to really get to grips with the problem and provide us with some actions that all of us can take to make things more suitable. And just to say that another reason for making a statement around joint working around air quality is the most recent coroner's report, which did identify air pollution as a contributing factor to a child death in London. And the report recommended that all local authorities have a part to play. And so that's why we want to make sure that we're ready for that.
And for the outputs to influence behaviour change.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, I think Rena's satisfied with that, so we've got Graham now.
Yeah, thanks, Julie, for your presentation. It's really good to see that you've got a comms officer and a COP26, and hopefully that will lighten your workload a little bit. So my question is round about the comms side of the officer. I'm trying to sort of understand what type of role the officer would play, because comms covers a multitude of SIMs, social media, writing press reports, etc., etc. But I'm more interested round about the public engagement. Mm-hmm. How do you see the role sort of evolving?
Yeah, okay. So two angles to that. First angle in terms of specific comms as HCC, the comms person, and you may know him, it's Tom Vigor, who you may have worked with him previously. He's an internal candidate and he's going to move across from comms to work specifically on Sustainable Hertfordshire. And he will be responsible for absolutely everything relating to climate change and sustainability. So that will be social media, update me, emails, and it will be internal campaigns as well as external campaigns in terms of HCC. And then in terms of public engagement, we also have our hopefully by the end of this month, another internal candidate specifically with regard to COP26 and also the Citizens Assembly. So between them, they will cover all aspects of communication and also public engagement.
Yeah, that's really good, because behavioural change with the public is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you know, Graham, we've got a particular work strand via HCCSP relating to behavioural change. And one of my officers, Zach, worked in the behavioural change unit. So he's bringing that expertise into Sustainable Hertfordshire, both for us as the county and also as the partnership.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Julie. Yeah.
Thank you, Graham. It's a great resource to have and we'll maximise on it. I intend for that to happen. I'm sure all of you do. Not just about letting others know what we're doing, but also to ensure that we do get behaviour changing and move forward on the journey of making an absolute difference. So I think that's the end of the question. So thank you very much, Julie. That's really an excellent presentation, and thank you for answering all the questions. So we're now going to go to the recommendations, if I can find them. So the first one, which I think is on the paper, is the panel are asked to note the content of the report and progress made to date, and the panel are asked to agree, this is the extra one I think that we discussed earlier, the panel are asked to agree that regular updates for individual service areas are presented to this panel twice a year to review and monitor their progress against their actions in the Sustainable Hertfordshire strategy and action plan. So if you could all go into chat again and agree those. Okay, yeah, so I think we've captured everyone now, and report noted and agreed for point 2. So again, thank you very much for that. The next item is with Julie again. We're going to be talking about the Queen's Green Canopy tree planting across Hertfordshire. So far away, Julie.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, me again. This is the reason we brought you a specific paper on this is because it's quite a large initiative with it, and it does help us to deliver our ambitions in terms of sustainable Hertfordshire. So the Queen's Green Canopy, as the paper says, is a tree planting campaign to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and the County Council were approached prior to the public launch of the campaign back in May by the Office of the Lord Lieutenant to seek our help in support and also coordination functions, and also to ask about HCC's delivery and what we can actually help in terms of planting itself. So luckily, the officers within Sustainable Hertfordshire had some capacity, and we said, yes, we will help to deliver and coordinate this particular programme across the county. Really large aspirations with regard to this. As the report says, we've got the opportunity to deliver on HCC land, and there are some specific bullet points relating to what we're seeking to deliver on HCC land around an avenue of trees at Aldenham Country Park, signature planting at all 10 district borough council on highway land. Looking into a feasibility of a Jubilee woodland, that would actually be potentially an extension to the existing Winnie the Pooh woodland, again at Aldenham Country Park, of approximately 0.3 of a hectare in terms of planting, and then looking at planting on our own sites around offices, touchdowns, day services and care home locations. And then separate to that, we're also helping everybody else to coordinate and plant. So that includes the whole of the school estate. Woodland Trust are offering free trees to schools on a first come first serve basis. So we'll be asked to help in terms of advice and guidance in terms of appropriate locations and appropriate species for that particular planting. And any school that's unsuccessful will then have the option to come to us, and HCC is hoping to help deliver any school planting if they don't fall under the first come first served Woodland Trust scheme. We've also contacted all district borough councils, and that's been a two-pronged approach. So the Office of the Deputy Lieutenants have approached the chief executives of each council. And then our officers were already working with green spaces and tree officers, and all 10 district borough councils are very keen to get involved in this initiative as well. And again, we'll help and support as best that we can. And then town and parish councils. So we approached all town and parish councils via the Hertfordshire Association of Parish and Town Councils, who contact those who are members and those who are non-members. And then we've had a really good flurry of activity, again, asking for advice, guidance and support around delivering of QGC on that particular land as well. And then very much through the deputy lieutenants themselves, they will be focusing on private landowners and helping business, industry and working with the LEP and also engaging with significant landowners across Hertfordshire as well. So it's very much a combined approach and a coordinated approach, and we will also be working via Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership to deliver this initiative as well. So there's already been a lot of engagement and a lot of interest in this, and we think we will get more. We'd like to obviously do more media around this, but we need to secure some funding first, and that bit is one of the bids that's going through the board process this afternoon. So fingers crossed, we will have some funds available, as well as officer time and officer advice and support around species, and also purchasing of the relevant saplings and specimens to be able to deliver this project across the whole of Hertfordshire.
Excellent, thank you, Julie. And I guess the advice on species is also resilience as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and that the QGC are suggesting that a list of species to plant, and they don't actually ask for indigenous species, but however we are seeking indigenous species, and as you say, to take into account the need for resilience as well. Right, thank you. So let's go to questions. Caroline was first up, very quick off the mark.
Thank you very much. I'm sure everybody on this panel would agree with me. I'm really excited about this initiative. I think it sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm really happy to hear that Aldenham Country Park, which happens to fall within my district, is going to be taking place. The thing I was wondering is there's obviously going to be a lot of press and PR about this. It's all really positive. It's all a really great news story. I just wondered to what extent we could actually encourage residents and individuals to also participate in this. I know that when I was born all those many years ago, my parents planted 2 apple trees at the bottom of our garden in our family home, which then grew, and obviously, you know, they sold the house about 10 years ago, so that obviously they went to the next resident. But I wonder if this might be an opportunity for us to encourage residents to also take it upon themselves, because, you know, every single tree that's planted, well, not every single tree that's planted, I'm sure will grow to be a success in the long term, but the more trees we plant, the more of an opportunity we have to, you know, really take advantage of this moment. So I just wonder if we could take that PR and try to make sure that individuals are also getting excited about the tree planting, the opportunity of the Queen's Jubilee to actually, you know, make a thing of this, and anything we could do to encourage them. Thank you, Chair.
I think Zach might have something to say on this as he's popped up.
Yes, thank you. I'll introduce Zach as the author of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Caroline, for that question. You're absolutely right. Engaging with the residents and citizens of Hertfordshire is something that we are planning on doing. It's something that we've got down in our comms plan for this entire programme of work. You may have noted in the report, there's 2 planting seasons, so it's running from October of this year through to March 2023 in 2 planting seasons. So we will be spending a lot of time with our new dedicated comms person to develop a full sort of communication approach to the citizens to try and promote this to them as much as possible. Absolutely.
And if I, sorry, Chair, if I can just add to that, we also have, just worth saying, this is only one planting strategy and campaign that we're working on. There are lots of other areas of work that we're also delivering, planting, and not just around trees, it's around habitat creation as well. The tree strategy is recommending, when it comes back through the process, we will be recommending that we have a decent number of trees to be able to give to residents for them to be able to plant, and also provide the advice and guidance around the correct species and the right planting in the right place.
Yeah, and in the last panel we were talking about hedgerows as well, so all
yes,
of those things are absolutely vital. Yeah, so thank you. So next, Ben, how many trees are you going to plant?
That's a very good question, Eric. A lot, I hope. It'll be the only exercise I get for the next 2 years. So it'll be good. I thank you again for the report. Really interesting. And following on from something that Caroline said, kind of starting with the Queen's Green Canopy, but thinking about the long-term tree, the council's tree strategy. So given that. Well, I understand already that we're starting to see issues with shortages of trees, of stock, and presumably this is only going to get worse as more and more councils across the UK plant more, not just due to the Queen's Green Canopy, but as long-term strategies. So I just wondered, first of all, whether the council has considered its own tree nursery program. Is that something or way of contracting? How do you envisage these trees being provided? Obviously bringing trees in from Europe has numerous issues, cost, obviously carbon emissions, risk of disease import. So is that something that we can tackle as a county? Can we grow our own? And that kind of follows on to what Caroline was saying about engaging the public. Is there a case, and you guys have probably already considered it, is there a case to start a community planting program, as in tree planting from seeds? So just if you think about the numbers, if just 1% of the residents planted 3 acorns every year for 3 years, we'd have 100,000 plus trees that were from local stock, and would be a critical way of it could offer a very strong way of engaging community, getting buy-in, and getting people who see their own trees grown from seed planted locally and forming a local woodland. Is that something that could be started as part of the Queen's Green Canopy comms in the next kind of year or 2 years, and then used to help the county with its tree planting project in the longer term? Just a question.
Interesting questions.
Zach, if you can just talk about the supply issues that we have actually come across already, and then I'll expand on some of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Ben. Great question, actually. And it is something that we did anticipate for this. Lots of councils up and down the country have their own tree strategies, and every single council is going to be involved in the QGC programme of works. So there's going to be huge demand on all tree nurseries within our borders, obviously. So we have already been making contact with the main tree nurseries up and down the country, asking them the exact same questions that you've just been asking us, if there's going to be a shortage. We've been reassured by a couple of the larger nurseries that actually there is still an availability for a vast number of trees, one which will certainly cover the QGC aims that we are looking to plant over the next couple of years, and also the numbers for the tree strategy as well. There are a few shortages from a few nurseries, ranging from a number of different reasons, such as Brexit, people finding it difficult to import, as well as poor yields because of the changing in weather circumstances, which is very on point for this board, which is good to know. But once our funding has been signed off, this week, early next week, we are looking at placing advanced orders so that we do secure the number of trees which we are looking to plant. Absolutely.
And just in addition to that, there we have the option to look at contract grow to order. So you're purchasing the seeds effectively, and then somebody will look after them for you and grow them to maybe a couple of years, and then you can purchase them and plant them. Obviously, that won't work in terms of QGC, but it will work in terms of future planting strategies. So there are contract to grow that we can look at, and we are looking at. We have previously organised and encouraged residents to collect acorns, for example. The problem with that is that people do plant those trees, and then they grow quite large, and they might not necessarily be in the right places. So we need to be a little bit careful about that. But I really like the idea of getting people involved and growing seedlings, and certainly we can explore that as part of a separate issue to QGC, but it could be a good way of starting that off. And then lastly, just to say that we are working with other county councils, because everybody's going to be in the same boat. So we're working with other county councils to explore lessons learned, and the potential again of like a shared resource. If anybody's got a spare piece of land where we can set up our own nursery, then that would be great.
Absolutely. Like Julie says, one of the challenges that we are coming across for this project, as well as our wider tree strategy project, we're finding that it's the land is the problem rather than the trees. Finding the land to plant the amount of trees which we want to, that is proving to be the difficulty.
Yeah, I have sycamores and other trees popping up all over the place. They just come, which is really good actually. But and when you mentioned acorns, squirrels came into my head. They do a great job, don't they? Next one is Tina.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for this report. So I was wondering about the support provided to district and borough councils, because we've talked a lot about enabling others. How does that work in practice in terms of the funding? Thank you.
So we already have a good working relationship with our district and borough colleagues in terms of their green space officers and tree officers, and we're also working with them with regard to the green spaces audit, which has been paid for collectively via HGCSP. In terms of helping them with regard to the delivery of QGC, again, it's about a collaborative approach. We're working with them, we're talking to them around advice, guidance and support, And if they did require help in terms of financial delivery, then that would be something we'd have to think through once we've got the finances agreed and we've got the funding available. So definitely it's about working in partnership and supporting them. And there's also the local authorities Treescape fund, again, which quite a lot of additional boroughs may well know about already and may well be accessing. But we've also made a partnership bid to that. So hopefully that will help deliver this particular agenda and other planting agendas as well.
Thank you for that. I do think that there will be support needed in terms of financial delivery. It's a huge undertaking, but really, really important. And we're all glad to see the work happening.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tina. And Steve Jarvis next.
Thank you. Yeah, there's some good proposals in here. I mean, I think from an environmental point of view, Queen's Green Canopy is going to be relatively modest in what it achieves itself, although it will no doubt promote the planting of some nice specimen trees which have other benefits. But it seems to me that the biggest potential benefit is actually, as has been talked about, encouraging other people to plant trees, because there are a relatively limited number of locations. And I think just two observations there. I mean, one is that when we announced that we're going to plant 200 highway trees or whatever it is, there's going to be a section of the public that responds that the council hasn't done well in terms of replacing removed highway trees, and that this will still not represent a net increase. So I think we need to be clear that if we're going to talk about this as an initiative that will encourage the public, we need to address the underlying issue about the management of highway trees as well, and explain how that's going to be dealt with. And I know that probably can't be done overnight, but I think that's an important consideration. I think the other area, we've talked about working with others and giving away trees and that kind of thing. I think we need to avoid getting into a sort of a competitive tree giving away situation. We need to make sure that there's cooperation, because there are some districts who already have some tree giving away sessions. And I know about medicinal parts is one of them. So I think we need to think about how we work together in terms of not just the Green Canopy, but the follow-on in terms of encouraging people to plant more trees in the longer term, because it's an important message in there, and I think that will get the biggest return if we can do.
And I think that's down to Ben's earlier point about the comms and the fact we've got a dedicated officer and all those good things. Simon's come up. Did you want to add anything, Simon?
Well, I'll just pick up the issue on highway trees, because it is one that we're looking at, and Highways colleagues are also looking at. So I can't give you an answer. What I can say is that as part of the overall tree strategy work that's ongoing, we will be bringing back at some point a tree strategy for Hertfordshire, which will include the management of highways trees. Of course, the thing with highways trees, very different from a number of other areas where safety is absolutely paramount. So you will always find a more closer managed regime of highways trees than you would, for example, in the middle of Broxbourne Woods, which we own. But absolutely accept, and we know this from other people as well, we need to be looking at planting regimes along and alongside the highway as we replace trees. But as I say, that will come back as part of the overall tree strategy. So Julie, I don't know whether there's any of those other points you wanted to pick up, or whether that's...
I think Steve's point around supporting and all district and borough councils absolutely agree with that. This isn't about being competitive at all, and it's only one programme. Don't forget, there's a number of different programmes that will be running. This is just about the QGC, and it's specifically looking at canopy cover, whereas lots of other opportunities will talk about hedgerows and also biodiversity improvements and delivery of other types of planting and habitat creation. So yeah, absolutely want to work in partnership. It's not about being competitive at all.
Okay, did you want to come back on anything, Steve? Are you okay with that?
No, I'm okay with that. I mean, I think the point, so this is just about the Queen's Green Canopy, but it will have an impact on all the other programmes as well, and it's an opportunity to change people's views, and these trees will have biodiversity and carbon sequestration benefits, even if that isn't the main reason for planting them.
Thank you. Yeah, I volunteer for an orchard and we've got 600 fruit trees and we've applied to the fund to get some additional trees there and hopefully fruit trees, because obviously that would make sense in that particular location. I think the final hand up is Jeff Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, I mean, this really is a fantastic initiative, as you know, when it was brought to us at the last panel. Really is good to see. And funny enough, when this meeting finishes, I'm off this afternoon to a local school where they're planting a tree with our MP. So yeah, very topical. But just on that point, I am hearing that they did have issues with, well, sort of planning permission. Have you had anything on about that with schools? So what they're actually doing this afternoon, they're going to plant this tree in a sort of container before they're given the go ahead to put it in a certain area of ground. I mean, it may be that it's sort of school planning rather than local planning authority. So just wondered if you had any issues or any discussions probably with the local planning authorities on the project. Yeah, working with the town and parishes, obviously I've had discussions with them in my division, and of course what they're saying is, yeah, fantastic initiative, but where the hell are we going to put these trees? So that is a big problem. And the other issue that was mentioned was, yeah, okay, so we plant all these trees, and who's going to maintain them in the coming trees, because they can get a little bit out of hand, and they do need maintenance, as we know. So is there a scheme in place to help with maintenance?
Sounds like Zach's going to answer that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jeff. Great questions, all of them very pertinent to the project. So if I touch on the school planting first, we have been working closely with the schools properties team and other stakeholders to develop planting guidance for each one of the for this project, which would identify the best location to plant, giving them ideas of where not to plant as well, and also the best type of tree, so the best species of tree to plant as well, depending on whereabouts the school is located. If it's particularly clay soil, then they need to go for X, Y, and Z species in order to ensure that the tree will survive the plant and survive long term as well. So that's in the process of currently being signed off, which has a couple of benefits. The first one being that the schools will plant in the best location, and the trees potentially won't get in the way of any future infrastructure builds, or increasing the size of the schools, or anything else that we may or may not want to do with schools in the future. The second one is to free up our schools properties team as well. We've got about 900 schools and academies across the county. If each one of those were to come to our schools property team for permission to plant in a certain location, they will very quickly be overwhelmed, and some other work may or may not be able to be taken forward. So once this planting guidance has been developed and signed off properly, we can disseminate that to all of the schools, and they should be able to plant in the correct location and plant the correct species. That's not to say that we are going to set them free and cast them away to do whatever they want. We will still be available to help out with any decisions, and still more than willing to go to do site visits to help them with their locations or planting if necessary and if requested. Moving on to the town and parish councils, yes, land again, absolutely, is a very big issue. Like I mentioned earlier, the trees don't seem to be the problem, it is the land. So we will be relying on them to identify where they can plant within their own land boundaries. And again, we can work with them to identify any appropriate land that we can work with them to plant on. And the maintenance and aftercare, absolutely a really important point. The last thing we want to do is plant all of these trees and then leave them, because chances are they will not survive the plant. And they will die, which is the last thing we want. So we are building into our costs and into this £200,000, which we have requested. We have budgeted for 3 years worth of aftercare costs which we can help to provide if necessary. And also, we are working with anybody who does want to plant some trees. We are ensuring that if they do have any ground maintenance contracts, that the trees that are planted for the QGC are built into these contracts as well moving forwards. So like I said, there is maintenance costs built into the bid that we're putting for 3 years worth of aftercare, whether for WIPs and standards, and 5 years for any specimen trees, which we will help to plant. With a lot of the people that we're working with, there's the opportunity for volunteer schemes to look after these plants and trees, and also for some of the hospices, the daycares, the care centres, the people's homes and things like that. They have some fantastic horticultural projects that go on, and the actual residents in there help look after them. So tying it into the community feel, getting them to help water and maintain the trees is another fantastic way to make sure that they have real buy-in and real commitment to make sure that these plants and trees last.
Thank you. And Jeff,
Thanks for that.
Good idea being in a container this time of year, so it can be water, but it needs to be watered during the summer holidays, tell them.
Yes, yeah, yes, that's right, and that's probably why they're delaying the planting, because they're waiting on the guidance. So I would imagine. So thank you very much for that, Zach. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And probably finally is Rena.
Sorry, I'm having some Wi-Fi issues, so I've had to move, and apologies if it's been asked. I look at this as, you know, a legacy project, and I was just going to ask, when we plant these trees, or when people are given the trees to plant, will they be given appropriate guidance? Because the last thing we want is in 200 years time or 100 years time they become, or root barrier treatment, whatever is needed, so that they don't have to be felled at some point because they're causing subsidence and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and that, oh sorry Zach, go on.
No, it's okay, Julie. Yes, we were just discussing with Jeff Rena about the planting guidance, which we are developing and looking to get signed off, which will cover all the sort of future-proofing issues. It will be amazing if we can project 200 years into the future to see where will be the ideal place to plant, but we will try our hardest to future-proof any plants as
Thank you.
As
apologies for the repetition.
That's fine.
No problem at all. Okay, that's it then. So I think, thank you, Julie and Zach, for that. We have one recommendation, which is the panel's asked to note the content of the report. If you could go into chat as usual. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Carly's just saying it's, yeah, item 6 noted. I'm a bit slow there. Thank you for that, and thank you both for the presentations and answering the questions. So look, we said that coming up to 12 or after 2 hours would have a break, but I'm just wondering whether you want to carry on with this item rather than have a break. You all okay with that? Yeah, carry on. Okay. So we're going on to item 7 now, which is Hertfordshire County Council Property Flood Resilience Pilot Scheme. And we just had, I sat in on a couple of days of scrutiny on flood management. So Andy Hardstaff, who's the team leader, was there. He's the presenter, and he's team leader Environment Infrastructure. And we've also got Sian Hall, have we as well, or just Andy? Andy, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This paper is an update, as I said, on the property flood resilience scheme. We brought a paper previously to panel to outline the proposals, and it's been a while since that paper, and also we've reached a significant milestone in the project. I won't go through all the figures because they're in this paper and the previous background paper, but it's framed around there were 343 properties in Hertfordshire that were eligible for this pilot based on the external funding, and based on that number we framed an experience from other authorities. We figured that we would probably get about 60 properties finally signing up, because for all sorts of reasons people aren't particularly engaged with putting property flood resilience measures into place. I'll just do a quick definition of property flood resilience. It's a range of measures to help resist and recover from flooding. In the Hertfordshire context and this pilot, we're looking at ways of reducing the probability of water getting into the property. So that's effectively sealing the property. The other approach, which you may come across, which is used around this term, is about when water has entered the property, increasing the or decreasing the impact and making sure that you can recover quickly. So things like hard floors, special plaster, but we're not doing that. We're just stopping the water coming in. The 343 properties, 93 of those have now had a survey completed by external consultants. So we know what measures each property is required at each property. And we're now just going out to engage and appoint a contractor to do the second stage of the project, which is the installation. The challenge is going to be converting the 97 surveys into 60 grants. Experience elsewhere, again, suggests that if people have to make a contribution, then that's quite a big barrier to them installing the measures. In terms of the take up, around about a third is very good and very encouraging. And as I say, the challenge is going to be to convert that into 60. There'll be no penalty if we don't manage to reach the 60. We simply won't be claiming the grant. And if we go over that number, there is a good chance that we'll be able to get the additional funding. So the number is quite manageable. Anyway, any installation will be good. It will start a conversation in Hertfordshire because we've got very little property flood resilience installed, and it is as people will have heard who were involved in the scrutiny, it's going to be a very important strand in terms of managing flood risk in Hertfordshire because it's very diffuse and dispersed, and we're only ever talking about small groups of properties which don't lend themselves to conventional schemes. As part of the pilot, we will be doing a full evaluation. In as much as it's very encouraging that 97 people have signed up for surveys, I'm more interested in the 246 who didn't, because that's the people we've got to target. As I say, encouraging people to take measures at a property level is going to be a key approach in terms of managing flood risk in Hertfordshire. So we'll do a full view in terms of putting it in place in the Hertfordshire context. There's a lot of academic research about specific barriers, and also we're picking up things from colleagues elsewhere. So as I say, we'll just be looking at the Hertfordshire specific issues. One of the risks we've identified in the project is in the time from when we first started to date. With Brexit and COVID, construction costs have increased. Excuse me. So the incentive from the original grant is probably not as great. We've had very encouraging discussions with the Environment Agency about increasing the level of grant, and I'm confident that if certainly for the properties that only have to make a small contribution at the moment, we may well be able to raise the ceiling to increase the incentive. And I think I've covered everything I want to say, so just if anybody's got any questions.
Okay, yeah, many thanks, Andy. Yeah, and a big question did occur to me, but I'll when I first saw this, we've discussed it, but let's see if there are any other questions on that first. So Steve's come up.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And you mentioned that the costs are likely to be higher than the grant. I mean, what sort of proportion of the total scheme costs? And I mean, I accept there's probably quite a large variation in the scope of these schemes. That may be difficult to answer, but typically, what sort of proportion of the total scheme costs is the grant likely to cover?
There is some outline detail which we put in the figure. We've done more in the paper. Sorry, at 611. We have done a more detailed analysis for the Environment Agency, and obviously these are groups into bands, so it is a bit crude, but hopefully, chosen the bands to be sensible. So 18 properties would be fully funded. For some of the properties, the grant available will be 4,000, and the measures might only cost 3. Obviously, we won't be giving them a 4,000; they'll just have the 3,000. The issue we've got is that these figures also need to be confirmed. They're based on estimates from the consultants, which has specified what's required. The actual figures against which residents will make their firm decisions won't be until the installers have done their survey and confirmed the cost of what needs to go in, because there will be installation specific costs as well. But we're fairly confident we're thereabout. At the moment, about a third, 18 properties would be fully funded, and then about another third, 24, would be making a contribution up to about £2,000, with 10 of those only 1,000. So if we were able to increase the grant to by say 1,000, I would imagine we'd be getting up towards half the properties not having to make a contribution.
I guess my apologies for not having read 611 properly before asking the question. I think my other question relates to this is a pilot.
Yeah.
What's the scope? I mean, clearly there are many more properties than we're going to deal with in the pilot. There are I assume more than we originally approached. I assume we approached the 300 we thought were most in need. What's the how would we roll this out on a larger scale, assuming the pilot is successful?
There would, yeah. I suppose a lot of these things we would take account of in terms of the analysis and the review of the pilot. But the kinds of things would be, the reason we chose the 340 odd properties was that it met the criteria for the external grant, because to get that grant, we have to move property from one defined risk band to another. So we have to demonstrate that has happened. And doing at this level, you can't do a detailed model for every house. So we, based on the best available information, some may have been included that shouldn't, and some might be included if we did more detail, but that's what we'll pick up in the analysis. Similarly, the surface water flood mapping is strictly shouldn't be applied at a property level. So I don't have complete confidence that it will identify all properties that will and won't flood. So we set the criteria that the property had to have informed us that they had flooded. This has the added benefit of those people, have experienced flooding, may still have sort of an overhang of anxiety about it. So we're targeting the people who live flooding, the sorts of people who are very anxious every time heavy rain is forecast. So that was the criteria for choosing it this time around. In the future, we would hope to target houses that haven't flooded, because it'd be far better to have the measures in place before people experience flooding, rather than, in effect, closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. And again, that will be part of the review. I mean, in terms of sustainable, what we're trying to do is pitch the grant at such a level that we will be able to claim this money again in the future. The background to the funding is that national funding, and there is some regional funding as well, which comes from the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, the funding is against what is in the jargon called outcome measures. And these are OM2s, which is basically flooded domestic properties. So there is a value against every property which has flooded. Now, the thing about the property flood resilience is that you don't have to go through a complicated assurance process, because we can quite easily evidence that a property has flooded or is at great flood risk. So it's very easy to make the case to secure that funding. So there is a defined amount of funding that we are confident we could secure for every property we can demonstrate at flood risk. So that underpins a kind of sustainable model going forward. Other authorities are already doing it. Essex, for instance, that, you know, we'd have to review of whether the county council itself thinks the county council should be, how much they think they should be putting in as well. But I think that needs to be subject to a more detailed report, and also changing the criteria, because the ones we use for the pilot wouldn't necessarily be the same criteria for the future.
Okay, thanks very much. So I assume that there'll be a report coming back to the panel maybe next year, once assuming the pilots go ahead on the predicted timescale.
Yeah, I mean, we're reasonably confident we can deliver everything by the end of this financial year. But I mean, but that depends on response from people and weather and contractors and all sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, certainly it would be maybe this time next year. Certainly we would be able to give an interim report, if not the full analysis.
I think it would be very useful if we had a report on the progress in a year's time. But this is clearly a significant issue and a way in which we might address some of it.
Yeah, I'm sure this will be ongoing. Just to be absolutely clear, because I asked this, if the survey indicates the cost above the grant level and the resident is not prepared to make their contribution, then clearly it can't go ahead, because what you can't do is leave gaps, which will then, so you can't partially secure a property, it has to be completely. So the residents need to understand that. That's right, isn't it, Andy?
Yes, yeah, and that's been made fully clear. It's kind of all or nothing. There is some discretion around whether people have a flood door, which is just like a conventional door but with a good seal, or whether they have flood barriers, which are in addition to your normal door. The kind of, you know, just like almost as like a simple board, but they're a bit more high tech than that, that you may fasten on the outside of the property. There is a choice there. What we would hope is that people will choose the doors over the barriers, because there are advantages. The doors are always in place, whereas the barriers would require people to fit them. I don't think that the alert system for surface water flooding is sufficiently well developed. We can't give reliable warnings about surface water flooding. It's very hit and miss, particularly when we're talking about summer storms, and also, you know, people have to be there, and all these sorts of complications. So yeah, that's the only discretion. But yeah, you're right. They can't just do it partially, because there's no point. And you know, it's quite small detail that needs to be thought about, like entries for cables and the gas and all that sort of thing, and then also going as far as waterproofing the brickwork as well.
Okay, great, thank you. I haven't got any more questions, so I'd like to thank you, Andy, for the report, and we'll now go to the recommendation, which is to note the report, if you wouldn't mind going into chat. Okay, so that's come up. Carl is saying that we've all noted that. So again, I'd like to thank you. Well, sorry, there's item 8 is other part 1 business, which there isn't any. So the date of the next meeting is the 10th of September. And I'd like to thank our officers for their presentation. It's been a really interesting panel and some very good questions from members. So thank you all for your participation, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you all. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.